AI needs RPA to solve real-world problems, and RPA needs intelligence for its robots to learn new skills. It's already been known in the community that RPA and AI work better together. When paired, they have the ability to make decisions and deliver efficient results. So in today's video, we bring to you another RPA challenge called Movie Search, where we would add the new skill of sentiment understanding to our robot. So without wasting any time, let's have a look at the challenge itself. The goal of this challenge is to create a workflow that will check if a movie has positive or negative sentiments. And in order to do that, the bot would add any 3 movies to the movie list, either by searching for it from the search bar or by simply clicking the Get Popular Movies button. Once the movies are added to the list, the bot clicks on the start timer to start the challenge. Thereafter, the first movie is being selected from the movie list in order to see the reviews. Each review is then analyzed to check if the sentiments are negative or positive. And the robot goes to the next movie and does the same thing. This process is repeated till all 3 movies have been checked. Thereafter, the robot presses the submit button to see the score. Well, that's all for this challenge. And now that we understand the challenge, let's start automating. But before we open our UiPath Studio, let's have a look at the 2 major components of this automation. The very first component, like any other automation, is the RPA bot. And the RPA bot here would be responsible to help us automate the navigation of the website and also extract the data. For an RPA bot, it's very easy to automate any rule-based task. But when it comes to intelligent decisions, then it needs the support from an AI model. And hence here as well, we have the AI model, which is the second component of this automation. The AI component would analyze the extracted movie reviews and return us the sentiment behind these reviews. And now the question arises, where would we get this AI model from? There are basically 2 ways to get an AI model running. The very first is to build your own neural network using Python. And Python already provides a predefined library called NLTK, which is nothing but Natural Language Toolkit, in order to carry out such tasks. And the other option is to use one of the predefined libraries available online. For the simplicity of this automation, we would be using one of these predefined libraries from the market. Well, now the next question is, how do I connect the RPA bot with the AI model? And a simple answer is using an API. Well, API stands for Application Programming Interface, and you can think of it as something that allows one piece of software to talk to another. In our case as well, the RPA bot would be talking to the AI model in order to get the sentiments behind various movie reviews. Well, each of these AI API models have a unique URL, and one such example is the Text Processing API, and its URL would look something like this. As the robot sends a request to one of these web APIs, it would also need to pass some parameters, which the API might need to process the request. In our case, since we want a sentiment analysis, we would be passing the movie review as a parameter. This movie review would then be processed by the AI model, and a response would be sent back to the robot. This response may vary depending on the type of request you made. Since in our case, we have asked for a sentiment analysis, we get a dictionary with probability score of various sentiments, and a label parameter which says that the text has positive sentiments. Now let's set up this web API in the UiPath Studio. Well, in order to use the web activities in the UiPath Studio, we need to first install these activities. Since they don't come pre-installed in the UiPath Studio, you need to go under Manage Packages, and then under All Packages, search for web.activities. Just click on this and then install it. Once it has been installed, then all the activities related to the web activities can be seen in the Activities panel. Once you're here in the Activities panel, you could go to the search bar and look for web activities, and you would find that there are two activities that have been added. One is the HTTP request and the other one is the SOAP request. Most of the modern AI models are based on HTTP request. So in order to use the HTTP request, let's open the main workflow and drag and drop this into the center. As you drag and drop it, the request wizard pops up. And in order to use the API, you need to fill the parameters in this wizard. So the first entry box is the endpoint. This is nothing but the URL that we saw in the previous slide, which was nothing but something related to text processing. So let's search for this web API over the internet. As you can see here, we have the API documentation for the text processing. So just click here and it would bring you to the main page of the textprocessing.com. Here, there are basically 4 APIs that are available. And since we were interested in the sentiment analysis, I would go here and this would bring you to the documentation page of this API. Feel free to go through this documentation and try and understand what it offers. But since we know that the endpoint or the URL of the endpoint is this, I would just copy this and paste it in the wizard. The next things that needs to be entered is the client certificate and the client certificate password. Since this is an open source API, I don't need it. But there are other APIs where you might have to add the client certificate, which in some cases could be a certificate that is on your system and you need to give the path of the certificate and also the password. We don't need this for this API, so let's move on to the next entry box, which is nothing but a selection of different request methods. And if I click on this button here, you would get all the requests that's being possible using the HTTP request. So I will go ahead and select post method. And for confirmation, you could just go back to your documentation and see here that it is an HTTP post request that needs to be made in order to use this API. So let's go back to the wizard and see what else needs to be entered. And the other thing that needs to be entered is the response type. And under this, we basically have 3 options, which could be any, XML or JSON. And in case if you don't know what kind of response is going to be coming out of the API, just select any. But in this case, it's going to be JSON. I'm going to show you in a few minutes. And then we need to select the kind of parameters that needs to be passed on to this API. So let's go back to the documentation and search for the parameters. And as you go down here, you would find the parameters that needs to be passed to the API call. And there's one parameter that is mandatory, which is the text, and the other parameter, which is not a mandatory field, but if you don't pass anything, the default value is taken as English. And the other languages that this API offers support for is Dutch and French. So in case if you want to do a sentiment analysis for Dutch and French, then you need to also pass this parameter to the API. But in our case, since all the reviews are in English, so we'll just leave this particular parameter. So let's select and add a parameter. And since the name of a parameter is text, you need to keep the same parameter name and then pass a default value. And I would call it, I love the movie. And then the next step is the authentication. And there are basically 4 types of authentication. And in our case, since it's an open source API, we don't need any kind of authentication. So let's just click on the preview and see what result we get. And once you click on the preview, an API call is being made and you get a response saying that the label is positive and the probability of positive sentiment is 0.71. We would be using this output in our automation in order to find what kind of sentiment a particular movie review has. So let's just click on OK, and this would set up the complete HTTP request. And as I click on the HTTP request, under the property panel, you can again go back and check for the different inputs that you have passed. So the accepted format was JSON, the endpoint is the URL that we entered, and the method that was needed was the post method. One thing that's still missing is that we have not defined a variable where we want to save the output of this API. And the output of the API can be saved under the output panel under results. And you need to define a string variable here. Let's call it response. And since it's in string variable, I'll just call it string. And once that's done, let's use a message box to get the output. And I would pass the string variable that we just created. So let's just go ahead and run this file, and you should get a message box with the response containing the probability and the label positive. As we are not interested in the complete output, and our interest is only the value of the label key, so we'll just convert the string variable into a JSON object. And in order to do that, there is an activity called deserialize.json. Just drag and drop it here. And as an input, it will ask you to pass the JSON string, which is nothing but our response string here. And as you pass this as an input, you need to also save this into a JSON object. So let's create a variable and call it response JSON. And once that's done, we'll just move the message box below the deserialize.json activity and try to print the JSON response. And since we are interested in the label key, just pass this key here. And now as an output, you would just see the value of the label key, which was nothing but POS. So let's run it, and in the message box, you should see POS. So this is basically how you set up a web service inside the UiPath Studio. Now for our automation, instead of passing the hard-coded text, we would be passing the movie review variable into the HTTP request, and we'll save the output as a JSON object and then extract the label in order to get the sentiment of the movie review. There might be cases where because of some regulation or performance issues, you might have to use a commercial API. The commercial APIs, along with the parameter, also ask you for an API key. This API key is basically used to authenticate your request. And in such cases, all you need to do is go under parameters and add a new parameter called API key and give its corresponding value. Now that we know how to add the AI component to the RPA workflow, let's have a look how to extract movie reviews from the RPA Challenge web page. So whenever you want to extract data from an application or a web page, the first thing that comes into mind is data scraping. So before we start using the data scraping tool, let's first go and have a look at the web page itself. And let's select a movie to see how the reviews look like. So this is the first review, and as you scroll down, here is the second review, and then the third review, and then the fourth, and then the fifth one. If we see here, this seems like a structured data. The data here is arranged in different boxes, and so the data scraping tools seems to be perfectly suitable for such a task. So let's go back to our UiPath Studio and click on the data scraping tool here. And as you click on the data scraping tool, the extraction wizard pops up. It would ask you to define a pattern on the web page. Click on Next and define the first element, which is the first text box. And in order to identify the pattern, it will ask you to select the second element. So to do that, just scroll down to the second element, which is the second text box here, and then again click on Next, and I would indicate the second text box here. Once you have indicated the second element, then the extraction wizard identifies all the similar objects on this particular web page. And if you see here, then the third, fourth, and fifth text boxes are automatically selected. I would rename the column name here to Movie Review. And click on Next. So if you see here, all the movie reviews have been extracted in the movie review column. And as you click on Finish, the wizard is asking you if there are multiple pages for such a result. But since we have just one page for the entire reviews, we'll just select No. But there are cases, for example, on web pages where there are multiple screens for the same result. For example, if you go on Amazon website and search for laptop in the search bar, then you don't get all the results on the first page. and there are multiple pages that you need to browse through to select different laptops. In such cases, you need to click yes here. But since we don't have a similar case, we would just click on no and then go ahead. As you click no, the workflow would be added to a UiPath Studio. And as the workflow has been added, and if you click on the extract activity here, you would see that in the output panel, a data table variable has been automatically created. We would be iterating through this data table in order to pass each movie review to our AI model that we have previously created. Well, the movie extraction using the data scraping activity and the addition of AI model using Web API were the two major components of this RPA challenge. The other components that we'll be using in this automation are while loop, use of dynamic selectors, and the click activities. All these three activities have already been explained in our previous RPA challenge. So if you have any doubt in these activities, just refer these RPA challenges in the link above. And now it's time to walk you through to the complete workflow itself. I've divided the main workflow into three major sequences. The first sequence is just starting the web browser and starting the timer. And the second sequence is the core sequence where the extraction of movie reviews is happening and also the assignment of sentiments takes place. Once all the movie reviews have been evaluated, then the robot clicks on the submit button and the evaluation score is calculated. If we have a look at the project files here, we basically have 5 files. The first file is the main file, which is being displayed here. And then we have an extract movie reviews YAML file. This is where data scraping technique is used to extract the movie reviews from the web page. And then we have the assigned sentiments YAML file. Within this, we are analyzing the extracted movie reviews and assigning the sentiment accordingly. And then we have 2 other files called the analyze sentiment. They both have the same function. The only difference is the API on which they are based. So I've already explained you how to use the text processing API. And as an add-on, I've also added the parallel dots API. The parallel dots API is a commercial API. So we are passing the API key as a parameter here. And since I'll be uploading this file in the Git, and just have a look at this particular workflow to see how to pass API key as a parameter. And now it's time to walk you through the workflow using the debug mode. So I will just go into the debug panel, and as I've already selected the execution trail and the highlight elements. So with the execution trail, you'll be able to see which particular workflow has been executed and which not. And with the highlight elements, the elements that are being clicked on the web page would be highlighted as the workflow proceeds. So in order to have a better view, I would just divide my screen so that we could also see the web page and the trail. And now let's run the file. So as you can see as the first step, the RPA Challenge web page has been loaded and the Get Popular Movies button has been clicked in order to add different movies. As you add these 3 movies, there would be a list of movies that would be created here, and the robot now needs to start the timer. So I will just click on continue. And as I did that, the timer has been started. And now as a next step, if you see here, we are inside the extract movie reviews and assign sentiment sequence. And we are assigning a movie ID as 1. The reason that we are assigning a movie ID is because we want to iterate through different movies in the movie list. And the ID is being used to select each movie dynamically. So I will go ahead and click on the continue button here. And here on the left hand side, you can see the different movie reviews have been read and the particular sentiments have been assigned. And the robot is also clicking on different movie reviews as positive or negative depending on the sentiment analysis API. Now since all the movies have been analyzed, the next step for the robot is to click on the submit button and see the score. And here in the output panel, you can see the different text that has been extracted. And for each text, we also have the sentiment, which is negative for this one, and so on for the other text as well. So for now, I would just click on the continue button and end this. And as you can see, that a success rate of 73% has been reached. Well, after running this workflow multiple times, I have seen that the success rate varies between 60 to 86% with the text processing API, with 86% as the maximum success rate. So go ahead and try other APIs and do share your scores in the comment below. And if your score is more than 86%, then please share the name of the API as well. On this note, I would like to end this video, and please check the description for the link to the Git Repository. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel for the other content. So see you again in the next video. Till then, keep automating.